Nobody came to the old woman's coffee shop. Then a ginger cat appeared, and everything changed. The bell above the door of the Daily Grind jingled weakly, a sound that had become increasingly rare in recent months. Mrs. Eleanor Rose, a woman whose 70 years were etched more in her weary posture than her remarkably unlined face, looked up from wiping down the already spotless counter. A gust of wind, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and impending rain, swept in, followed by Mr. Henderson, one of her last remaining regulars. "Morning, Eleanor," he wheezed, his voice raspy from a lifetime of working in the town's now shuttered textile mill. He shuffled to his usual stool at the counter, his movements slow and deliberate. "Morning, Arthur," Mrs. Rose replied, forcing a smile. "The usual?" He nodded, settling onto the stool with a sigh. "Black, 2 sugars. And maybe one of those, what do you call them? Biscotti things." Mrs. Rose poured the coffee, the rich aroma a fleeting reminder of brighter days. The Daily Grind, nestled in the heart of Harmony Creek, Ohio, had once been a bustling hub. Harmony Creek, a small dot on the map. The town used to be thriving with the textile mill and a few other small factories. Young people came for jobs. For 40 years, since her husband, Frank, had passed, the coffee shop had been her life. It was more than just a business. It was a place of warmth, of connection, of shared stories and laughter. She had seen children grow up, couples meet and marry, and the slow, steady rhythm of life in Harmony Creek unfold within its walls. But Harmony Creek, like so many small towns across America, had fallen on hard times. The mill had closed a decade ago, throwing hundreds out of work. The younger generation had moved away, seeking opportunities in bigger cities. The remaining population was aging, shrinking, and struggling. The Daily Grind had felt the pinch acutely. Foot traffic had dwindled to a trickle. The cheerful chatter had faded, replaced by the mournful creak of the old building and the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. A wedding gift from Frank. Mrs. Rose had tried everything. Discounts, new pastries, even a brief, ill-fated attempt at introducing artisanal lattes. Nothing seemed to work. She placed the coffee and a slightly stale biscotti in front of Mr. Henderson. He took a sip, his eyes closing in momentary bliss. "Still the best coffee in town, Eleanor," he said, his voice a little stronger now. "Thank you, Arthur," she replied, a genuine smile finally gracing her lips. These small moments, these fleeting connections, were what kept her going. But they weren't enough to pay the bills. The bank had sent another notice. The landlord was growing impatient. Mrs. Rose had started dipping into her meager savings, the money she had painstakingly set aside for her retirement. She knew, with a sinking feeling in her heart, that she couldn't keep it up much longer. The Daily Grind, her legacy, her sanctuary, was on the verge of closing. Later that day, after Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Gable, another regular who came for her afternoon tea and a slice of lemon cake, had left, Mrs. Rose sat alone in the dim light of the shop. The rain had started, drumming a melancholic rhythm on the window panes. She looked around at the empty tables, the silent coffee machine, the dusty shelves lined with mugs and bags of beans. A wave of despair washed over her. She thought of Frank, his booming laugh, his unwavering optimism. He had always believed in the power of community, in the importance of a place where people could gather and connect. He would have been heartbroken to see the Daily Grind like this. "What am I going to do, Frank?" she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The only answer was the relentless drumming of the rain and the hollow silence of her dying dream. She knew she wouldn't cry. She hadn't cried for so many years. Crying was a useless action, Frank had always said. As the evening deepened, Mrs. Rose began the closing routine. She wiped down the tables, swept the floor, and turned off the lights, one by one. Each click of the switch felt like a small death, a further step towards the inevitable. She got ready for the last step. Locking up. She stepped outside, the cold, damp air raising goosebumps on her arms. As she reached for the lock, she noticed a lump huddled against the brick wall, sheltered slightly by the awning. It was a cat, a ginger tabby, its fur matted and wet. It was lying motionless, and for a terrifying moment, Mrs. Rose thought it was dead. Mrs. Rose knelt beside the cat, her heart pounding. She gently touched its side, fearing the cold stillness of death. But then, she felt a faint rise and fall, the barest hint of breathing. Relief washed over her, followed by a surge of compassion. She couldn't just leave it there. The rain was picking up, and the temperature was dropping. The cat would surely perish if left exposed to the elements. Hesitantly, she scooped it up. It was lighter than she expected, all skin and bones beneath its matted fur. It didn't stir, its eyes remaining closed. She cradled it in her arms, feeling the faint tremor of its body. Back inside the coffee shop, she laid the cat on a pile of old towels in the back room, next to the small, rarely used space heater. She found a small bowl and filled it with water, placing it near the cat's head. She didn't have any cat food, so she crumbled a bit of the biscotti into another bowl, hoping it might entice the creature to eat. She sat beside the cat, watching it intently. Its breathing was shallow and ragged. She gently stroked its head, feeling the rough texture of its fur. It was a beautiful cat, despite its condition. Its ginger fur, once vibrant, was now dull and streaked with dirt, but she could see the potential for beauty beneath the neglect. "You're safe now, little one," she murmured, her voice soft and soothing. "You're safe." She spent the next few hours tending to the cat, periodically checking its breathing, moistening its lips with water, and offering it bits of food. It remained unconscious, its body limp and unresponsive. Mrs. Rose began to fear the worst. She had done all she could, but it might not be enough. As the first rays of dawn crept through the windows, Mrs. Rose finally drifted off to sleep in the armchair beside the cat. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The weight of her worries about the coffee shop, combined with the anxiety over the cat's condition, had taken its toll. She woke with a start, disoriented and stiff. The first thing she saw was the cat, sitting up, albeit weakly, and lapping at the water in the bowl. Its eyes, a pale, almost translucent green, were open and alert. Mrs. Rose gasped, a mixture of relief and joy flooding through her. "You're awake." The cat looked at her, its gaze unwavering. It let out a faint, raspy meow, a sound that was more of a croak than a proper feline greeting. Mrs. Rose smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're going to be okay, aren't you?" She carefully picked up the cat, cradling it in her arms. It snuggled against her, purring weakly. The purr was barely audible, but Mrs. Rose felt it vibrating against her chest, a tiny engine of life sputtering back into action. She spent the morning caring for the cat, cleaning its fur with a damp cloth, and offering it more water and crumbled biscotti. It ate slowly, tentatively, but with increasing appetite. As the day progressed, it gained strength, exploring the back room with wobbly steps. Mrs. Rose decided to name him Rusty, a nod to his faded ginger fur and the rusty, creaking state of her coffee shop. The name felt fitting, somehow. She opened the daily grind as usual, but her mind was preoccupied with Rusty. She kept checking on him, bringing him out to the front of the shop for short periods, wrapped in a soft blanket. He seemed content to sit on the counter, observing the few customers with his curious green eyes. Mr. Henderson was the first to notice him. "Well now, what have we here?" he asked, peering at Rusty with interest. "I found him outside last night, nearly dead," Mrs. Rose explained. "I couldn't just leave him." Mr. Henderson chuckled. "Looks like you've got yourself a new mascot, Eleanor." Mrs. Gable, who arrived shortly after, was equally charmed by Rusty. She cooed over him, stroking his fur and offering him a tiny piece of her lemon cake. Rusty, surprisingly, accepted the offering with a delicate lick. The presence of the cat seemed to bring a spark of life back to the daily grind. It was a small thing, a subtle shift, but Mrs. Rose noticed it. The atmosphere felt a little lighter, a little warmer. The few customers who came in lingered a little longer, chatting about Rusty, sharing stories about their own pets. As Mrs. Rose closed up that night, she felt a flicker of hope, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Rusty, curled up asleep on the counter, seemed to be a good omen. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was a sign that things were about to change. The next few days were a revelation. Rusty, now fully recovered, transformed from a sickly, near-death creature into a surprisingly affectionate and playful cat. He had a peculiar habit of rubbing his head against customers' legs, purring loudly, and demanding attention. He would bat playfully at dangling keys, chase dust bunnies across the floor, and occasionally, to Mrs. Rose's amusement, attempt to climb the curtains. His most endearing trait, however, was his uncanny ability to sense when someone was feeling down. He would approach them silently, sit beside them, and simply rest his head on their lap, purring softly. It was as if he understood their sadness and offered a silent, furry form of comfort. Word about the coffee shop cat began to spread through Harmony Creek. It started with the regulars, Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Gable, who shared stories about Rusty with their friends and neighbors. Then, a few curious onlookers stopped by, drawn by the whispers of a friendly ginger cat who seemed to have a magical touch. One morning, a young woman named Sarah, a single mother struggling to make ends meet, came into the daily grind. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She ordered a coffee to go, her voice barely above a whisper. As she waited, Rusty, who had been napping on a nearby chair, jumped down and approached her. He rubbed against her legs, purring insistently. Sarah hesitated, then reached down and tentatively stroked his fur. Rusty looked up at her, his green eyes seemingly filled with understanding. He let out a soft meow, then nudged her hand with his head, as if urging her to continue petting him. Sarah's tense shoulders began to relax. A small smile touched her lips. She sat down at a nearby table, and Rusty promptly jumped onto her lap, settling down with a contented sigh. Mrs. Rose watched the interaction with a sense of wonder. She had seen Rusty work his magic before, but it never ceased to amaze her. He seemed to have an intuitive connection with people, a way of offering comfort and companionship that transcended words. Sarah stayed for over an hour, sipping her coffee and stroking Rusty. When she finally left, she looked noticeably calmer, her eyes brighter. She thanked Mrs. Rose not just for the coffee, but for the unexpected solace she had found in the company of the ginger cat. He's special," Sarah said, her voice choked with emotion. "He just knew." That afternoon, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Fitzwilliam, a retired history professor known for his gruff demeanor, came into the shop. He had heard about Rusty from his neighbor and was curious to see the miracle cat for himself. Mr. Fitzwilliam was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He ordered a black coffee and sat at a table, observing Rusty with a skeptical eye. Rusty, unfazed by the professor's stern gaze, approached him cautiously. He sniffed at Mr. Fitzwilliam's shoes, then, with a surprising burst of agility, leaped onto the table and sat directly in front of him. Mr. Fitzwilliam stiffened, clearly not a cat person. He was about to shoo Rusty away when the cat did something unexpected. He reached out a paw and gently touched Mr. Fitzwilliam's hand. The professor froze. He looked at Rusty, his expression softening. He slowly reached out and stroked the cat's head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You're a persistent fellow, aren't you?" Mr. Fitzwilliam stayed for the rest of the afternoon, engaging in a surprisingly animated conversation with Mrs. Rose about local history. Rusty remained on the table, occasionally nudging the professor's hand for attention. It was a scene that would have been unthinkable just a week ago. As the days turned into weeks, the daily grind experienced a slow but steady resurgence. People came not just for the coffee, but for the cat. They came to pet him, to talk to him, to simply bask in his calming presence. The coffee shop, once on the brink of closure, was starting to feel alive again. The local newspaper, the Harmony Creek Gazette, a small weekly publication that usually focused on town council meetings and high school sports, ran a story about Rusty. The headline read, "Feline Savior of the Daily Grind?" The article, accompanied by a charming photo of Rusty perched on the counter, described his arrival, his near-death experience, and his remarkable impact on the coffee shop and the community. The story went viral, at least by Harmony Creek standards. It was shared on social media, discussed at the local diner, and even mentioned during the Sunday sermon at the town's largest church. Rusty became a local celebrity, a symbol of hope and resilience in a town that had seen its share of hardship. The impact on the daily grind was immediate and dramatic. Customers, many of whom hadn't set foot in the coffee shop for years, flocked to see Rusty. They came from neighboring towns, even from the larger city an hour's drive away. The daily grind was buzzing with activity, the air filled with the cheerful chatter of voices, the clinking of cups, and the constant purring of Rusty. Mrs. Rose was overwhelmed, but in a good way. She had to hire 2 part-time employees, a young college student named Emily and a recently retired woman named Susan, to help her manage the increased business. She expanded the menu, adding sandwiches, salads, and a wider variety of pastries. She even started selling Rusty's favorite treats, a special blend of catnip and salmon-flavored snacks that were a huge hit with both feline and human customers. The influx of customers brought a renewed sense of energy to Harmony Creek. The other businesses on Main Street, a struggling bookstore, an antique shop, and a small hardware store, also benefited from the increased foot traffic. People who came to see Rusty often ended up browsing the other shops, rediscovering the charm of their small town. The town council, seeing the positive impact of Rusty's fame, organized a Harmony Creek Appreciation Day, a small festival centered around the coffee shop. There were food stalls, local crafts, live music, and of course a meet and greet with Rusty. The event was a huge success, drawing hundreds of people from across the county. Mrs. Rose, standing on a makeshift stage in front of the daily grind, addressed the crowd. Her voice, usually soft and hesitant, was filled with newfound confidence. "I never imagined," she said, her eyes sparkling with tears, "that a little stray cat could bring so much joy and hope to our town. Rusty is more than just a mascot. He's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always room for kindness, connection, and a little bit of magic." The crowd roared with applause, their cheers echoing through the streets of Harmony Creek. Rusty, perched on Mrs. Rose's shoulder, purred contentedly, seemingly basking in the adoration. But with the newfound success came new challenges. The increased workload was taking a toll on Mrs. Rose. She was working longer hours, struggling to keep up with the demand. She was grateful for the help from Emily and Susan, but she still felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Mrs. Rose collapsed. Emily found her slumped in a chair in the back room, her face pale and her breathing shallow. Panic surged through the young woman. She immediately called 911. The ambulance arrived quickly, its sirens shattering the peaceful evening quiet of Harmony Creek. Mrs. Rose was rushed to the county hospital 20 miles away. Emily and Susan, their faces etched with worry, closed up the coffee shop and followed behind in Emily's car. Rusty, who had been sleeping on his favorite cushion behind the counter, seemed to sense that something was wrong. He paced restlessly, meowing anxiously, and scratching at the door. At the hospital, Mrs. Rose was diagnosed with exhaustion and a minor heart condition. The doctor stressed the importance of rest and a reduced workload. He warned her that if she didn't slow down, she risked a more serious health crisis. The news hit Mrs. Rose hard. She had always been a strong, independent woman. The thought of being unable to run the daily grind, her life's work, filled her with dread. She knew the doctor was right, but she couldn't imagine letting go. Emily and Susan visited her in the hospital, bringing her flowers and a get-well card signed by many of the regular customers. They assured her that they would keep the coffee shop running. But Mrs. Rose could see the worry in their eyes. They were both capable, but they lacked her experience and her deep connection with the community. Rusty was not allowed in the hospital, of course. Emily and Susan took turns caring for him, bringing him to their homes at night and keeping him at the coffee shop during the day. He seemed subdued, missing Mrs. Rose's presence. He spent most of his time curled up on her usual chair behind the counter, occasionally letting out a mournful meow. The regular customers, hearing about Mrs. Rose's hospitalization, rallied around her. They brought food to the coffee shop for Emily and Susan, offered to help with chores, and sent a constant stream of cards and well wishes to the hospital. Mr. Henderson, his own health failing, visited the coffee shop every day, offering words of encouragement and sharing stories about Mrs. Rose's kindness and resilience. Mrs. Gable organized a prayer circle at the local church, and even Mr. Fitzwilliam, the gruff retired professor, sent a handwritten note expressing his concern and offering his assistance. Sarah, the single mother who had found solace in Rusty's company, stepped up in a significant way. She volunteered to help out at the coffee shop, working evenings and weekends while Emily and Susan managed the daytime hours. She had a natural warmth and empathy that resonated with the customers, and she quickly became a valued member of the daily grind team. One afternoon, Sarah brought Rusty to the hospital. She had arranged it with a sympathetic nurse, who understood the importance of the bond between Mrs. Rose and her cat. She smuggled Rusty in a large carrier bag, keeping him hidden under a blanket. When Mrs. Rose saw Rusty, her face lit up. She reached out a trembling hand, and Rusty immediately jumped onto the bed, nuzzling her face and purring loudly. Tears streamed down Mrs. Rose's cheeks as she stroked his soft fur. "Oh, Rusty," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I've missed you so much." The visit, though brief, had a profound effect on Mrs. Rose. It reminded her of the love and support that surrounded her, the community that had blossomed around her and her coffee shop. It gave her the strength to face her health challenges and to start thinking about the future. After a week in the hospital, Mrs. Rose was discharged. The doctor reiterated the need for rest and a reduced workload. Mrs. Rose knew she couldn't go back to her old routine, but the thought of selling the daily grind, of giving up her life's work, was unbearable. As she settled back into her small apartment above the coffee shop, a new challenge emerged. A letter arrived from a lawyer representing a large corporation, Brew Va Bites, a national chain of coffee shops known for its aggressive expansion tactics. The letter stated that Brew Va Bites was planning to open a new location in Harmony Creek, directly across the street from the Daily Grind. They offered to buy Mrs. Rose's business, but the offer was insultingly low, far below the market value. It was clear that they were trying to force her out. Mrs. Rose was devastated. She had poured her heart and soul into the daily grind. She had weathered economic downturns, personal tragedies, and countless challenges. But this felt different. This was a deliberate, calculated attack on her livelihood, on the community she had helped to rebuild. She shared the news with Emily, Susan, and Sarah. They were equally outraged. They knew that the daily grind, with its small-town charm and personal touch, could never compete with the corporate giant and its deep pockets. Mr. Henderson, overhearing the conversation, slammed his fist on the counter. "They can't do this," he exclaimed, his voice shaking with anger. "We won't let them." The news spread quickly through Harmony Creek. The townspeople, who had come to love the daily grind and the sense of community it represented, were furious. They saw Brew Va Bites as an unwelcome intruder, a threat to their way of life. Mr. Fitzwilliam, using his historical knowledge, discovered that the building housing the daily grind was a designated historical landmark. This meant that there were restrictions on renovations and alterations, which could potentially complicate Brew Va Bites' plans. Mrs. Gable organized a petition, gathering signatures from nearly every resident of Harmony Creek, opposing the opening of the Brew Va Bites franchise. Sarah, using her social media skills, launched an online campaign, #SaveTheDailyGrind, which quickly gained traction beyond the town's borders. The local newspaper, the Harmony Creek Gazette, ran a series of articles exposing Brew Va Bites' aggressive business practices and highlighting the importance of the daily grind to the community. The town council, initially hesitant to take a stand, was swayed by the overwhelming public outcry. They scheduled a special meeting to discuss the issue, inviting representatives from both the Daily Grind and Brew Va Bites to present their cases. The meeting was packed, with residents overflowing into the hallway. Mrs. Rose, accompanied by Emily, Susan, Sarah, and Rusty, who sat quietly in a carrier at her feet, spoke passionately about her coffee shop, its history, and its role in the community. The Brew Va Bites representatives, slick lawyers and executives in expensive suits, presented their case with cold efficiency. They argued that their new location would bring jobs and economic growth to Harmony Creek, and that competition was good for consumers. The turning point came when Mr. Fitzwilliam, using his booming professor's voice, delivered a scathing critique of Brew Va Bites' business model, accusing them of destroying small-town businesses and homogenizing the American landscape. Then, Sarah stepped forward, holding Rusty in her arms. She shared her personal story, how the Daily Grind and the Ginger Cat had offered her solace and support during a difficult time in her life. Her words, raw and emotional, resonated with the audience. "The Daily Grind is more than just a coffee shop," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a home, it's a family, and Rusty, he's the heart of it all." The town council, moved by the outpouring of support for the Daily Grind, voted unanimously to deny Brew Va Bites' application for a building permit, citing the historical landmark status of Mrs. Rose's building and the overwhelming opposition from the community. It was a major victory, but Mrs. Rose knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Brew Va Bites was a powerful corporation, and they were unlikely to give up easily. They could appeal the decision, tie it up in legal battles for years, or find another location in Harmony Creek. The community, however, was not deterred. They had tasted victory, and they were determined to protect their beloved coffee shop. They organized a series of fundraising events, bake sales, car washes, and even a small-town auction to raise money for a legal defense fund. Local businesses, inspired by the Daily Grind's resilience, offered their support. The bookstore started selling Save the Daily Grind merchandise, the antique shop donated a portion of its sales, and the hardware store provided materials for repairs and renovations to the coffee shop. A group of local artists created a mural on the side of the Daily Grind, depicting scenes of Harmony Creek's history and featuring Rusty prominently in the center. The mural became a symbol of the town's spirit and its determination to resist the corporate takeover. Even the children of Harmony Creek got involved. They organized a Pennies for Purrs campaign, collecting spare change to donate to the Legal Defense Fund. They made posters and signs, decorating the town with messages of support for the Daily Grind and Rusty. Mrs. Rose, watching the community rally around her, was overwhelmed with gratitude. She had always believed in the power of connection, but she had never witnessed anything like this. It was a testament to the bonds that had been forged within the walls of her coffee shop, the relationships that had blossomed over cups of coffee and shared stories. One evening, as Mrs. Rose was closing up the shop, a representative from Brew Va Bites approached her. He was not one of the lawyers or executives she had seen at the town council meeting. He was a younger man with a weary expression on his face. He introduced himself as David, and he explained that he was a regional manager for Brew Va Bites. He had been following the situation in Harmony Creek, and he had been deeply impressed by the community's response. "I've been with this company for 5 years," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I've seen firsthand how they operate. I've seen them crush small businesses, destroy communities. I'm tired of it." He handed Mrs. Rose a file. "This is confidential information," he said. "It contains evidence of Brew Va Bites' unethical business practices, their violations of zoning regulations, their attempts to bribe local officials in other towns. He paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm risking my job by doing this," he said. "But I believe in what you're doing here. I believe in the power of community. And I believe that Brew Va Bites needs to be stopped." Mrs. Rose was stunned. She took the file, her hands trembling. She thanked David, her voice filled with emotion. The information in the file was explosive. It provided concrete evidence of Brew Va Bites' wrongdoing, enough to launch a major legal challenge and potentially damage their reputation irreparably. Armed with the evidence provided by David, Mrs. Rose and her legal team, funded by the community's fundraising efforts, filed a lawsuit against Brew Va Bites. The lawsuit alleged unfair business practices, violation of antitrust laws, and attempted bribery. The story made national headlines. The small town of Harmony Creek, fighting against a corporate giant, became a symbol of resistance against the homogenization of American culture. Support poured in from across the country, from other small businesses, from community activists, and from ordinary citizens who were inspired by the daily grind story. Brew Va Bites, facing a public relations nightmare and the threat of a costly legal battle, backed down. They withdrew their application to open a location in Harmony Creek and issued a public apology, promising to review their business practices. It was a complete victory for the daily grind and the community of Harmony Creek. The coffee shop, once on the brink of closure, was now thriving. It had become a destination, a place where people came not just for the coffee and the cat, but for the sense of belonging, the feeling of being part of something special. Mrs. Rose, realizing that she couldn't continue to run the coffee shop on her own, made a decision. She offered Emily, Susan, and Sarah a partnership in the daily grind. They accepted, their hearts filled with joy and gratitude. The four women, representing different generations and backgrounds, formed a powerful team. They shared the responsibilities, each bringing their unique skills and talents to the business. They expanded the menu, introduced new events, and continued to foster the sense of community that had made the daily grind so special. Rusty, the ginger cat who had started it all, remained the heart of the coffee shop. He continued to greet customers with his affectionate headbutts and purrs, offering comfort and companionship to all who entered. He was getting older, his ginger fur fading to a pale, almost golden hue. He moved slower, napped more, but his green eyes still sparkled with wisdom and kindness. Years passed. The daily grind continued to flourish, a testament to the power of community, resilience, and the unexpected blessings that can come from the most unlikely of sources. Mrs. Rose, her hair now completely white, spent her days greeting customers, sharing stories, and watching with pride as the coffee shop she had built with Frank continued to thrive. One crisp autumn afternoon, Rusty, curled up in Mrs. Rose's lap, took his last breath. He had lived a long and fulfilling life, bringing joy and connection to countless people. His passing was peaceful, surrounded by the love of the woman who had saved him and the community he had helped to build. Mrs. Rose wept, her tears falling onto Rusty's soft, faded fur. She mourned his loss deeply, but she also felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had been more than just a cat. He had been a friend, a companion, a symbol of hope. The community of Harmony Creek mourned with her. They held a memorial service for Rusty in the town square, sharing stories about his kindness, his playful antics, and his uncanny ability to sense when someone needed comfort. They erected a small statue of Rusty in front of the daily grind, a permanent reminder of the ginger cat who had brought them all together. The daily grind continued, stronger than ever. The spirit of Rusty lived on, in the warmth of the coffee shop, in the laughter of the customers, in the bonds of friendship that had been forged within its walls. It was a place where everyone was welcome, where stories were shared, and where the simple act of kindness, like offering a home to a stray cat, could change the world, one cup of coffee and one purr at a time. The legacy of Rusty would live for 1,000 years.